Hello there, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. It is Patrick here, Egg Not Poker. So, new video today. Gonna be going for part 4 of our secrets and neat little tricks and exploits on how to beat microstakes. Well, I'll say microstakes. They say microstakes to mid stakes, but still, I suppose these videos are a little bit more focused on people who are basically losing or breaking even with rate back on microstakes to low stakes. But there will still definitely be a massive amount of this video and the other videos before it, which will be extremely useful in any stakes that you play. So, it's been a while. So, as always, guys, if you haven't already, please leave a like, a comment, please subscribe to the channel. It has been a long time, so I hope everyone's had an amazing Christmas and Boxing Day, and New Year's is coming up soon. So, just very quickly then, before we start, I want to say something. So we've been streaming a bit more on our challenge VODs, and we are up to NL50 now, so happy days. In terms of experience, I love nit shaming and having a go at nits and whatnot, but I think that this list of monstrosity of bullet points and numbers here is I'm just gonna kind of big myself up a little bit. I think for free content, this might actually be one of the greatest free pieces of information, like documents, study documents, whatever, that you will ever encounter in terms of poker. Just it's not just strategy; it's a mixture of exploitation, a lot of strategic points, and a lot of not just game theory but mental game theory as well. So lots and lots and lots of information to take away from this one. Just before we start, I want to say something. It's probably going to be a long video. I'm not going to put this into segments. I'm just going to basically just chuck it all out there and go straight in with it. There's going to be a lot to take in, and I'm just going to sort of preemptively warn you, it's probably not going to be super interesting. For a lot of people are going to be like, oh, boring. If you're stuck, even if you're winning, it doesn't matter. This is going to be extremely helpful to you. I can promise you this. Okay, so just sort of bear with me. Yeah. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with these mental game points. There are quite a few of them. I'm going to talk through those. Then we're going to look into some pros and cons of game selection. We're going to be looking through general strategic points, bits and bobs that I think people are not doing so much and do not get kind of covered much. Some do get covered in other strategy content, but a lot of these are adjusting everything. A lot of them are extremely relevant, not really covered in many other pieces of info that I found, and just extremely interesting and will be very valuable to you. Okay, so let's just dive straight in. I'm trying to think of where I want to start with this, and to be honest with you, there's so much information that we need to cover. It's going to take a long time. Okay, so warning out the way. There we go. So in case anybody has no information or idea of who I am, at the moment I've been currently streaming. Well, I've been streaming for the last year, give or take. Not very much volume, but putting in some more work more recently, I suppose. But I've been streaming from NL2 up to NL50 now on our stream challenge, where we start with 25 and we're up to like 11, 1200, something like that. I haven't been on purpose posting graphs. I haven't really been very focused on a lot more of the strategies. It's more just kind of like playing, talking through, and so on and whatnot. I've kind of neglected YouTube a bit, for better or for worse, so I'm going to sort of try and put a little bit more time into that here and there where I can. So, as always, I always love an apology for not posting because it's been a long time in between these videos. I will definitely get some more 200 and some 500 VODs for you. I owe you those, so those will be coming. Do not fear. So, what is all this then? All this mental game stuff, all this strategic game stuff, all these bullet points, all this really boring stuff with no kind of cool, interesting, crazy introduction. I just want to make you guys better players immediately off the bat. I'm going to sound very entitled. I'm going to come across as a bit of a lord here, but at the same time, fuck it, who cares? This is going to be very valuable. It's ridiculously valuable. It's probably too valuable, in fact, to just kind of throw at you. There's been several predecessors before it that I've put out, but this is the 4th installment, I believe. So let's just get started. So I just want to kind of I want to ask you to kind of put yourself into a state of zen and focus. Look at yourself right now before we've even begun, and have a look at your own game and see where you're at. Okay, there's no right and wrong. There's no nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be gratified for. You could be an NL2 player and losing for 10, 15 years, play recreationally. You could be really, really trying your best to beat the game, like NL2, NL5, whatever, can't beat the game for whatever reason. You could be an NL100, NL500 plus crusher. It doesn't really make any difference. What you need to do is you need to say to yourself, what do you want from the game? And where is the best place to attain it? So, for example, are you playing primarily for recreation? Are you playing like sort of not perhaps professional or semi-professional, but just something that you enjoy doing, but you're trying to improve at? Are you trying to improve your strategic game and trying to play the best game you can? Are you just trying to make a bit of extra cash on the side? What are you trying to do? Because what I'm trying to say here is a very sort of badly put introduction, is I want you to kind of be honest with yourself, see where you're at with your game, and start from there. That's where I want you to put yourself before we begin. I don't want you to take in all this information and be like, oh, okay, fine, excellent, whatever. I want you to literally say, I'm awful, or I'm amazing. And I want you to see where you're at in your game, and I want you to put yourself there and then begin. Because I want you to kind of put yourself in a position where you're saying, right, this is the stake I play. This is the stake I want to play. I feel like I'm improving, or I'm not improving. What can be changed? What can be done? I kind of want you to put yourself in a position where you can identify where you are currently, because that's the most important thing above anything else. Poker's a process, a long-term process, okay? And in order to even attain any kind of progress, you need to understand where you're at, okay? So just try and visualize that for a second. I'm an NL5 player, I'm an NL10 player, I'm an NL100 player, I play for fun, whatever. Be honest with yourself and start from there, okay? That's where I want you to begin. So, mental game focus. That's what we're going to start on before anything else, all this other jargon. What is mental game? Just first of all, okay? What is mental game? Why is this important? We're talking about poker. I want to learn how to play poker. I want to learn how to play strategy. Why the hell do I care what mental game is? What is mental game? Mental game is one of the big secrets of this game, okay? There's not really like a magic trick that's just going to make you a good player. The mental game is a massive part of this whole process, okay? I don't call poker a game. I call it a process. It's a process where you're basically psychologically being honest and true to yourself with your own ability, with your own sort of psyche, where you were at in terms of the game. You need to kind of understand what flaws you have, not only in terms of strategy, but also mentally in your head, and you need to find out where you're at in order to improve. I honestly think that this is probably by far one of the biggest things that no one really ever talks about or truly understands, okay? I think when people play, they just play and they focus solely on what's in front of them. They focus solely on the strategy, but nothing to do with the actual sort of psychology and mental side of the game. So beginning with the first point here is fear of losing. So I'm just going to say it, okay? I'll use myself as an example in a lot of these points. You need to say, this is why I said, oh, think about where you're at before the video starts, right? Whatever stake you play, whatever win rate or loss rate that you have, no one ever says loss rate, by the way, everyone's always got a win rate. Whatever your win or loss rate is, whatever stake you play, it does not matter. It just only matters that you focus on where you're at, what your goals are, and what you're doing in between those goals to attain them. Okay, it's no good just playing at a stake and seeing how you go and whatever happens. It's all about the process and psyche in between. So fear of losing, this first point here, obviously, this is so important, I think, to a lot of people, winners, losers combined. Fear of losing, so you can have an anxiety about playing at all. You can have a win rate, a small win rate, and you're fearful of moving up to the next stake because you may have built a small bankroll. Just for the sake of let's sake of argument, what's a good example? Let's say you start on an L2, whatever, you've got $20 in your account. For the last couple of weeks or months, whatever, you built that up to say $40, $50, $60, whatever it is. And you're saying, okay, well, maybe I'll give a go to the next stake. But you're concerned maybe the players are better. You're worried or concerned that, I'm comfortable here. I'm winning here for this XY win rate. Maybe I don't want to go up to the next stake. All of this needs to be completely annihilated. It needs to be taken completely out of the equation, okay? What you need to see is this game is a process where you start, you could see it as a video game in a way, but it's a process where you're beginning at whatever stake you feel comfortable playing, whatever stake your bankroll can, we'll talk more about this in a moment, whatever kind of bankroll you can apply and put into practice. And I'm trying to say this like in the best way possible, and I'm struggling here, so bear with me. But in terms of like this whole, there's no requirement to get from level 1 to level 2, NL2 to NL5, for example. There's no requirement from NL10 to NL25. Lots of people ask, and lots of people say, "Oh, well, what kind of win rate do I need to go up? What kind of bankroll strategy do I need to apply? Or what? How much? How many buy-ins should I take on this shot take? How long should I be playing?" None of this is relevant to an extent. Okay, what I'm going to say is this: you need to say where you're at. You need to admit where you're at. You need to identify your win rate in terms of the game, and you need to be honest and say, "Look, I can beat NL2. We'll use this as an example. I played it for a couple of weeks. I want to take a chance. Then fucking go for it. Just go for it. Take that chance. There are no questions. There are no rules. There are no reasons. If you can say, I can probably beat this deck. I'm doing okay. I might take a shot. I might take a chance. Take it. There is no requirement. If you go broke, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. If you lose a couple of buy-ins, you lose all your buy-ins. Things can be changed. Your game can be improved. Variance may or may not be an issue. We'll talk about that again in a moment because that's a big thing. What you need to say to yourself is, I have the confidence to go for the next stake, so I will jump to it and have a go. Just have a fucking go. Just go for it. Just do it and have fun. That's all that matters. That's the most important thing. If you're an NL100 player and you're a very, very small winner and you've been playing for a couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years, whatever, and you want to try NL200 and you feel like you're not ready, you're never going to know if you're not ready until you jump ship. Because inevitably and essentially, this fear of losing and this kind of anxiety of like, oh, I've built this role, I'm scared of losing it. This whole thing needs to be taken out of account. Because as soon as you understand that this game is a process where you literally there's no monetary value. This is another point, but I'll just add it to this. You cannot be scared of anything. You need to be prepared to lose. You need to be prepared to make mistakes. You need to learn from those mistakes. You need to identify what problems have been made and then move forward. It's so important that you just kind of enjoy the process and be prepared to fail. Don't be afraid of losing. Okay, I have lost. I mean, over the last maybe like 10 years or so. Maybe not over the last 3 years, but the 10 years before it or so. Like the amount of times I've had to redeposit. Like I always used to redeposit like $10 at a time, playing like NL2, like not Russian cash. Sorry. I can't remember what it was called, but Rush Poker or whatever it was on Full Tilt, and also PokerStars Zoom, and 10 years ago, whatever. I was so afraid of losing. Anytime, like I'd build it up to like $14, $15, but ooh, I'm good, but I'd be terrified to lose it. I'd be like, oh no, I'd feel bad about losing. It's not relevant. You've got to push yourself into a situation where you just play and you enjoy. It doesn't matter if you lose. If you lose, that's fine because that's part of the game. Even the best players in the world lose. You just have to understand there is no monetary value to the game until it gets withdrawn from your account into your bank account. That is not money. It is just, they're just betting discs. They are tools to be used in a fashion where you play a game and you have a process and a strategy where you play that game. It does not matter about variance. It does not matter about anything at all. It's just you. You cannot be afraid. Okay, you have to completely like kind of develop this leather skin mentality where you're literally just pushing through. I'm going to play the game. I'm going to play the best game I can all the time. I'm going to do my best to enjoy all the time when I play my best game, and then keep moving forward. Okay, you cannot be fearful of losses. You cannot be you can't be wavered by wins and losses. Let's be honest, right? How many people, like you're watching right now, right? When you lose 5 buy-ins in a session, whatever, you always feel bad. It always sucks, right? And then when you win 5 buy-ins and you click the exit button, you're done. You feel good about the session. Oh wow, maybe I'm a good player. Maybe I'm a winning player. Maybe I'll try this. And then when you lose 5 buy-ins, you're like, oh man, what did I do wrong? Variance, I ran into it, or whatever. It's that psychological thing, right? People hate losing. People love winning. We're egotistical. We're competitive. We all want to win. We hate losing, and we find excuses for why we lost, and we try and big up all the wins and everything. It's not relevant. It's just you must break out of the shell and get into a formation and have a battle plan on how you're just going to keep moving forward and enjoy the game. Right? Can't be fearful of things. You must feel good about where you are and keep pushing forward for progress. So another one here is letting go of the monetary value of big blind. So that's what we said. We kind of covered this, but just very quickly. This is a thing where it's like, honestly, right? I think a lot of things that people struggle with, including myself, okay, is when you see, like, I would honestly tell you, like, if you can, change it from money to big blinds if you're able to on your site and play it as big blinds. That doesn't mean we're not doing that to pretend that we're not playing for a stake we may feel uncomfortable playing or whatever. It's just you need to see this as a computer game. You're just playing your best in the computer game. You need to be prepared to. It's like stock trading. I know nothing about stock trading, but it's consistent levels of risk. This game, okay? You're betting and raising. You're value betting. You're bluffing. You're bluff catching for a reason. You feel that it's going to make you money. In order to do that, you cannot play scared. You cannot be fearful. You cannot disappear from spots. You cannot see it as, oh, I'm up 200 big blinds. If I make this bluff, then and I lose. It already blinds you. Like, it's literally like this shield. It just blinds you from what is right in front of you. Okay, you can't be afraid of just bluffing or value betting. You can't be like, oh, maybe I'll do this. It's all bullshit. Like, you have to literally see the game as it is. It is a game, and it is a process in order to beat that game. In terms of variance, then, variance is an excuse for anything. It's part of the game. Absolutely. It couldn't be better said. Stop saying variance. Fuck variance. Variance is part of the game. You can't avoid things. A lot of situations where you consider them bad variance aren't even bad variance. And I promise you, over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hands or millions of hands, variance is absolutely a thing in terms of, like, there will be situations where you'll get a distribution of cards over 5k hands, 10k hands, 500 hands, where you just get tons of value. All your bluffs work, all your value comes in, you feel on top of the world. There will be situations where the distribution completely fucks you up as well. You would just flop set over set, and you'll lose your river nut flush over second, or whatever. It doesn't matter, because you have to understand process. It is part of the game. There is no secret to this, okay? If you are losing, it's because you're losing, and you must admit it. There are reasons why you are losing. Good players can still lose over long periods of time. Variance is a thing. I'm going to sound contradictory here. Variance is a thing in terms of, like, distribution, but generally speaking, there are a lot of situations where people are just not as good as they think they are, and they just blame variance and just immediately use it as an excuse and a reason to, oh, I had a bad session, I ran pretty bad. Well, maybe you just played awful. Maybe you're just not as good as you think you are. Maybe you did run bad. It doesn't matter what the answer is, because it's still all irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that you enjoy the process, you keep improving, and you keep putting the time and the work in, and you don't have these excuses and bullshit things that just saying, oh, I lost because of X, Y, and Z. It does not matter. All that matters is that you keep reviewing your hands and you keep improving. That is all that matters. That is all that matters. Okay. Worrying about vacuum win rates is also quite similar to this, in the fact that this is why I have a love-hate relationship with graphs. Okay. We'll talk about graphs in a minute. But in terms of vacuum win rates, what do I mean by vacuum win rate? I hate people that say, oh, I played 10,000 hands, I played 50,000 hands, 100,000 hands. We're talking, like, less than, say, 200,000 hands, I would say, which is still is a good, reasonable sample, but it's not actually a very big sample in the grand scheme of things. But still, let's just say anywhere up to, like, 200k, people are like, oh, I've got this win rate, I've got that win rate. Can I just say something? If you've got more than 200,000 hands on a stake and you are beating the stake quite comfortably, the only thing that matters is that you move up to the next stake. That's it. If you are losing over, say, 200,000 hands, yeah, there's probably a reason that you're losing or breaking even, whatever. That means is that's one good thing about graphs. About graphs in a minute. But don't be like, oh, I've played like this. I'm talking more like session by session, or over a small group of sessions. We say, oh, I've lost over this, like, last 10,000 hands. What am I doing wrong? Blah blah blah. And I'm winning over this 10,000 hands. That feels amazing, excellent, feels good. I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's not quite the most important thing in terms of, like, the hierarchy of importance. The most important thing, generally, I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself here, is that you are just consistently working on your game, and you're trying to just keep pressing into the next stake. You need to stop sitting at a stake where you are comfortable. You need to stop sitting at a stake where you feel like, oh, I'm happy with it. Fuck happiness, man. Well, we love happiness, but push forward to the next stake. Risk it. Like, you need to get out of your comfort zone and get into the next level. If you're just sitting at a stake and you're a small winner, medium winner, you need to push on to the next stake. You need to play better people. You need to be pushed back down, and you need to work on attaining a win rate on the next stake and keeping that kind of process where you're consistently moving forward. Excuse me. So then focusing more onto graphs, which is what I wanted to go onto here. Overly focusing on graphs and subjective sample sizes. This is all still mental game, by the way. And the reason it's mental game is because all of these factors, all of these points, I told you this would be boring, didn't I? They are affecting your mental stability and your mental state. Okay, constantly worrying about a win rate in the back of your head, constantly worrying about, oh, I've lost in the session, I know I've lost in the session, I'm terrified about looking at what my balance looks like. This all needs to be removed from you because this is holding you back. This is causing stress. This is not optimal. This is not good. Okay, only focusing on graphs and subjective sample sizes. Graphs. The good things about graphs, okay, there's pros and cons of graphs a bit further down. I suppose this covers both in a way. The good thing about graphs is over a certain amount of hands, and I'm talking like a lot of hands, like hundreds of thousands of hands, you can kind of look for trends. Well, first of all, you can see if you are actually technically winning or losing over a decent sample, but you can look for trends. So, for example, you can see, my red line is tanking, my blue line is tanking. I can look specifically through hand histories, like PokerStars 4, for example. You're looking at your graph, look through the hands and the state sessions, session by session, hand by hand. Where are you winning big pots? Where are you losing big pots? What kind of small and medium pots are you consistently winning or losing? And you can look for trends. You can look for problems. You can look for also, good parts of your game. And you can see what areas of the game tree you need to work on. Maybe you're not thin value betting enough. Maybe you're just folding too much. Maybe you're not aggressive enough. Whatever it is, you can find those trends and you can work on it. That's good. That's really, really good. We like that. The thing that's not so great, though, is looking at, you're just looking at a win rate or you're just looking at your loss rate and being like, ooh, I'm only 2 big blind behind 100 winner, or I'm 2 big blind behind 100 loser. It's really bad in a mental state. It's good to admit you're losing, and it's also good to identify that you're winning and then use that to move on to the next state, or identify what can be changed to improve your current strategy and your win rate on the current stake that you play. But I think a lot of people get bogged down and they're like session by session looking at their graphs, and they're looking at, it's really bad mental game. I'm not saying you should be fearful of looking at graphs. Graphs are have their amazing points too. But I think people just what's your win rate? And that's all that matters. They look at someone else and go, what's your win rate? Who cares what your win rate is? Essentially, if you're losing, graphs are really good to identify what the problems are with the trends. But in terms of win rate, it doesn't matter. I don't want to say I've got X win rate at stake. Who cares? I don't care. I'm not trying to get the highest win rate possible on the next stake. I want to move into the next stake as soon as possible. And I look for my trends. I look for my flaws in my game. I constantly study. I constantly work hard on my game. I look at my hand histories. I look at the player in front of me, and I move forward and I progress. That's what's really important. Okay, don't get bogged down on small sample size. 50k hands is a small sample size. 100k hands is a reasonably small sample size. You need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hands to technically beat what you may call variance. And honestly, guys, if you keep sticking in ace, king, and queens in pre-flop against someone who 3-bets 3% of the time, it's not variance to lose, which we'll more talk about later. Okay. This is subjective because this is also a bit strategic, but fear of playing deep. I think a lot of people kind of have this this is a bit subjective. So what I'm going to say first of all is if you don't study or if you haven't worked on deep stack strategy, 150, 200 plus big blinds, then I kind of understand that rat holing kind of makes sense in a way, because it's it's not great to try things and click buttons and guess when you're really deep. But when you do understand how to play deep, that absolutely propels you forward. I have situations where I can be haha, I can use this 300 big blind stack to completely bulldoze people in situations. If I check raise for 50 big blinds, they may not fold X, Y, and Z. If I check raise for 200 big blinds, they may well fold. If I'm trying to get a maximum win rate and I know they've got a good fucking hand and I can get money from that hand, instead of winning 100 big blinds from them, I can win 300 big blinds from them. Whatever the case may be, these situations are going to be needed later down the line. I think what I will say is, just mentally speaking, as we're focusing mainly on mental game to begin with, is if you have this win rate of if you're only used to playing 100 big blinds, whatever, if you get to 130 big blinds, fine, reset the stacks. If you have done a little bit of work on it, then go for it and have a go. But this is what's difficult, because if you don't study it, it's not a good idea to start just testing things out really deep, because you're just going to iron yourself out and you're going to just dramatically burn through money. And you're going to put yourself in a lot of bin spots, and the game changes quite dramatically when you're deep. But I just wanted to put it there. I think a lot of people have this kind of general fear factor. What I'll say is don't feel bad about rat holing your stacks, because if you don't play deep, you don't understand how to play deep, then don't play deep. If you study and focus on 100 big blind strategy, then fine. Excuse me, just play on 100 big blind stacks. Don't feel bad about rat holing, essentially. Okay. Lack of confidence in your game. So this is huge. People have this misconception. This is for the good and bad side of it. But people have like, I don't know what it's called. There's probably some kind of psychological term for it. But people have like a kind of, they have a bit of their brain that says like when things are going well, that confidence sort of creeps up and increases. And sometimes they also, on the flip side, when they're losing, that confidence dramatically drops. You know, damn it, I'm losing at the last couple of sessions. Maybe I'm just doing things wrong. Maybe things are bad. And when you're winning, you just think everything's amazing. You know, you need to kind of like be really confident. I'm not saying in your game, but I mean confidence in yourself. You need to say, look, I don't care if I lose. I'm going to make a damn good shot at it, and I'm going to keep losing until I win. I'm going to keep focusing. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to keep learning and preparing myself. I'm going to use the tools available to me. I'm going to study solvers. I'm going to look at people's content on YouTube. Some of that's absolutely awful. Some of it's amazing. Hit and miss, I suppose, but it's free content. There are so many tools out there that can help you to keep moving forward. There's no such thing as just being stuck at a state forever and, you know, it's the end of the world. There's so many tools. Generally, like just common sense is actually like a massive part of it also. Just as a thing, I was losing play for a very, very long time. So how did I get better? Honestly, I admitted I was awful. Worked with a few people. I didn't get coaching, but I worked with other players, and we kind of like traded information with each other. We focused on doing sims together, but also I just kind of admitted I wasn't very good. I understood what my flaws were. There were a lot of them. And then that gave me the confidence to then kind of like put motivation to then study, work hard. And then because I knew what I was doing to an extent, I'm like, haha, I know what I can do in this spot. That then gave me the confidence. That reduced the kind of the tilt factor for me. Okay. Pros and cons of graphs. We've kind of covered this, but I just want to say one more thing with that. Be very careful with graphs. Okay. Essentially, like people are too bogged down on what the specific win rates are. If you can beat a stake over 50k, 100k hands, then take a shot at the next one. That's your priority. You get knocked back down. That's okay. That's okay. Losing's fine. It's part of the game. People don't just win and just destroy everything automatically. It doesn't quite work like that. You cannot be fearful of losing to an extent. All right. If you're winning over a decent sample, then jump up to the next one. Have a go. Have a go. Get knocked back down. Build it back up. If you get knocked down again, well, that's fine. Then build it back up. That's the whole process of the game. That's it. That is the process of the game. Okay, don't worry about it. Tilt control. This is a massive point. It's quite difficult to kind of just go over this very briefly, but just tilt comes from different things. People get revenge tilt, where they lose to a certain player very often. They can get entitlement tilt, where they feel like, the universe is against me. Like, people can get also entitlement where they feel like they're better than everyone else, and like, oh, you're a terrible player, how can you do this? You don't deserve to win this. You played so bad. How many of you literally, just think about it right now, because I know it's 100% of you, not 99, but 100% of you will literally have this in some form where someone plays badly, quote unquote, against you, or you feel that you should have, they played badly, whatever. And you just get into the situation where you're like, oh, I didn't deserve to lose this. And you get angry, you get frustrated. These guys play really badly and they won all the money. Ooh. It's again, you need to take a step back and see how silly it truly is. It doesn't matter that you want people to play badly. That's the whole point of this game. In order to win, someone must lose. It's money, right? It's big blinds, whatever. You need to beat someone. You beat them, they lose, and you win. That's how it works, right? The worse people play, the more you're going to win. Sometimes, if for example, to give you an example, right? You get in aces, they get in kings, right? Whatever, fine, doesn't matter. You're going to lose that, 18% of the time, whatever it is. You're mainly going to win, though, and that is poker. You're winning in the long term. This game is a long-term process. It's a long-term game. It's a psychological game. It is a strategic game. It is a consistency game. As long as you're making less mistakes than your opponents, you're exploiting your opponent's mistakes, you have a strong strategic GTO framework, all of this combined, you will just do better than your opponents who don't have that power. Okay, it's just that simple. You will If you put the time and effort in, you will progress and you will succeed. It's just that simple. It really is. Okay. The game is not that simple, but the process is. And as long as you admit your failures and you admit your flaws and are prepared to fail in order to progress, you will succeed. I'm not saying magic wand, ta-da, there you go, you're a millionaire. I'm just saying you will improve, okay? But you have to be prepared to put the work in. You have to be prepared to lose. You have to be prepared to shot take. If you're fearful, then honestly, there's no fucking hope for you because there's no you're not prepared to change. If you're not prepared to change, you won't win. It's just that simple. It really, truly is, okay? Ignorance to self-ability, this is massively relevant to me, is the fact that I did not realize how bad I truly was for a very, very long time, okay? I just literally said to myself every time I lost, I was like, is this unlucky? Or I don't admit that I play badly, because God forbid I play bad. I never play bad, right? You need to kind of say, look, the way you need to look at this game, like I already said, it's a process more than a game. But the way you need to look at this whole thing, okay, is you need to say, this is what I said right at the very beginning, where am I? Okay, if you're an NL2 player, NL10 player, NL25 player, whatever. By the way, if you play low stakes and micro stakes, it doesn't mean you're inherently like a suboptimal human to someone who plays NL200. A 200 a person who plays NL200 who can win is technically better than someone who's like playing NL2 and break even, for example. Yeah, fair enough. But it's not a case of self-worth. Those two people are identical in their self-worth. Okay, it just means that one person has put a lot more work into their game. They're a lot better in the game, and maybe mentally and strategically, than the person at NL2. You can beat NL200 and have a really terrible mental game. I can promise you that. You can have a really, really good strategic game and be losing at like micro stakes or break even because your mental game is a problem. But you can also have a really good mental game, but just your just general knowledge of the game is holding you back. So they kind of work hand in hand in a way. But you need to kind of say to yourself, look, I'm losing. Look, I'm break even. I'm only winning or break even because I'm winning because of rake back. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You just need to literally give yourself a pat on the back for just admitting where you are and what your problems are. Right now, literally right now, I'm serious. Just get a notepad or Word document and just put down a couple of points. Just say what are your positive, like let's say not positive, negative, but let's say what are your 3 best and 3 worst, like what are your 3 biggest flaws in the game, or areas for improvement or development for those people who get offended, and 3 areas that are your strengths in the game. So, for example, like a couple of my strengths, I feel like I understand what combinations are good to have as blockers to bluff with, and what kind of good candidates, hand candidates, are good to call with, like bluff catch. I think I'm extremely good at redlining, and I'm extremely good at attaining value. However, I think some of my flaws are my egotistical and competitive nature is to just kind of tone it the fuck down a bit sometimes. I get like a nit who'll 4-bet me and I'll be like, whoa, I've got ace-5 suited, but smart, blind on blind. This is a pure all-in jam. That's great, but that means nothing versus someone's 4-bet range who's like aces, kings, queens, ace, king, which means that I'm going to get called every single time and I'm going to be getting annihilated against that range of hands. You see? It may look awesome on stream or whatever, but it's a mistake, right? It is a mistake, which is a big problem for me. Also, just identifying like bluff catches, maybe good bluff catches, but against someone who doesn't really bluff enough, that bluff catcher becomes a bit of a highly minus EV call, for example. So there you go. There's me as an example. Underestimating villains is huge as well. I suppose they're all important, but underestimating your opposition. You may think that you're really good, and you're probably not. Okay, the people around you are also probably like, they can be good, they can be bad, whatever, but they can improve. They can have good and bad days. They can get better. They can get worse to some extent. They can be drunk. They can be tired. They could be playing deep and make a mistake, lose 300 big blinds in a hand, and think, I got completely off the rails. The whole thing shifts and change, hand by hand, villain by villain. You can't see the person in front of you online. You can't identify them. You can only see their basic HUD data, or you can see the hand specifically that they're playing against you. That's all you can see. Don't go into a game and be like, oh, this is entitlement in a way, I suppose, but it's like, oh, I'm the best player ever. You're worse than me. You can't do blah, blah, blah. Don't underestimate. Give people credit. When people play well, give them credit for playing well, because it's being humble. It's this whole thing of mental game. Your people are so focused on, oh, my graph says I'm 4 big blind per 100. Oh, let's post that. Look, fuck you guys. I'm an amazing winner. Fuck all of you. And then all the people who are losing go, oh, I don't want to look at people who are winning, or I'll shit on people who are winning because I'm losing and I don't like it. This all needs to be removed. It's a really bad, very bad mental game, and it's what's blocking you from improving. It's because you're just thinking everyone's awful and you deserve everything, and you got a rain cloud above your head and you're just losing. It's unlucky, whatever. No, it's not. You're losing because you're losing. You're winning small because you're winning small. You're a really strong winner because you're a strong winner. It comes down to what your mental focus is, how much work you're putting into the game. Are you actually able to apply the theory that you learn? Are you able to adapt to the players you're against? Are you able just to sit the fuck down and chill out and enjoy the game? Everyone is so anal and disrespectful and toxic in this environment. You need to just enjoy the whole process. Very, very important. Ignorance to strategy, I suppose, is quite close to this, to underestimating villains. Is just, if you don't okay, I'm just going to say something. If you study solvers, whether they're relevant or not to the games that you're playing, but just for the sake of saying it, if you start studying, you're less ignorant to what are some of the more strategic plays and what can be good or bad, some of the framework that you can apply. But a lot of people just generally are ignorant to just what is in front of them. People don't see that, I'm just going to say it again, entitlement, but you're just going to see how bad people truly play and just how poorly people kind of just what information people get, how people apply it, how terrible people can play, how good people can play. That people are just ignorant to basic strategy. Honestly, if you learn basic framework and understand how to just generally at a basic level exploit people, the game doesn't become that difficult, especially at the lowest levels. It becomes quite simple. It's just about how much time you put into applying that strategy and not deviating too hard and doing anything too silly. Just to say it bluntly. But a lot of people are quite ignorant to how badly they truly play and only focus on everyone else's bad play. Okay, you need to just say to yourself, that's why we said at the very beginning, where are you? Because if you're stuck at any stake and you're stuck at there for a long period of time, people are knocking you back down, you need to see what they're doing. Yes, appreciate how well they play and identify how they're playing, but also just focus on your game. Just focus on solutions to problems, and rather than just you can identify problems and focus on solutions for them. That's really good. But don't just be bogged down on, I'm running bad, I'm getting unlucky, whatever. Who cares? You just need to be focusing on, right, okay, I played this session. I'm going to look at some of the spots. Okay, I got a lot of value there. Could I have got more? I'm looking at a spot where I won a lot, but I got lucky. Well, actually, we won in the session because you got lucky. Really, you shouldn't have called there. Really, you shouldn't have played in a certain way. That needs to be changed because the game is long term. It's not session by session. It's not looking at a graph over X amount of hands. It's the long term. And when I say long term, I mean forever. If you make a good play consistently, it's gonna net you a profit. If you make a mistake, be it a small mistake, all the time, it's gonna net you a loss. So you need to just identify what the problems are, look for trends. That's what's good with graphs. But just general ignorance to what's actually going on it needs to be changed. You need to say to yourself what your problems are. You need to really, really kind of look at what your problems are, but also on the strengths as well. Don't just look at the losses. Look at the profits as well. I won in this pot, excellent. Could we have won more though? I look at the losses. Okay, could we have potentially avoided this? But remember, losing is also part of winning. You can't just not lose pots for whatever reason. Okay, so don't worry about it. Don't be fearful of it. Just kind of enjoy it. Really, really focus on it. That's the primary focus at the beginning. So that's almost 40 minutes into the video. Oh my god, I probably lost all of you. But these things here, they don't get talked about. I think people are I'm not going to name names, but I'm just going to say there's so much shit out there that it's just oh, these are the secrets to winning in 2024. Do this, play this hand in a certain way, and you will become a winner. Can I just be honest with you? It's total shite. Honestly, just play good. Learn how to play good and just play. That is really important. And also don't be nasty to people. If people make mistakes, don't shit oh, you didn't B60 there, you didn't B150, you could have check raised that. Let people make mistakes. Just focus on your game. Just focus on that. When I stream and stuff, I make I make loads of mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I actually personally have no problem with people backseating because it's good. I want people to say, look, actually, I think maybe you should have done this. And when I look back at my sessions, my hand history, it's yeah, I probably could have done, to be honest. Thank you for letting me know. I think it's a good idea. But it's just general toxicity. People look at people who are better than them and go, ooh. And then people who look at worse than them, and then they also go, ooh. Just let people play badly, let people play well, and just focus on you. All that matters. Game selection protocols. This is huge. People never talk about this. Game selection. So I'm just going to say to you, again, coming back to that point right at the very beginning, because you want to say who you are and what you want out of the game. If you want to just play for fun, and you don't care about, because we don't give a shit about win rates, we just care about what the process is and how to improve. But just if you just enjoy playing Zoom poker, like, just I'll give you an example. You play NL 25, you're losing, winning, doesn't really make a difference. You enjoy playing that. You don't want to put too much money into the game. You're not too focused. You do try, of course you try, but you're not winning. You're not playing that to like live. You know, you're just playing. It's the amount of money you want to play and risk. I'm not going to say win or lose, or be prepared to win or lose. You're just prepared to risk this much money. You're prepared to have like a couple of $100 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is. Good for you. Enjoy it. That's it. Like, enjoy it. If you're playing and you're trying to quite, take the game a bit more seriously, okay? Because let's be honest, right? Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of you, hundreds of millions you play the game. Astronomically small amount of you are going to win. Astronomically large amount of you are going to lose. It's just how life. It's just life. It's just how it's going to be. Okay. But in terms of taking the game seriously, like, game selecting is pretty big. Let's be honest. If you've got 5 Linus Loves sitting in a 6-max game and there's an open seat and you sit there, you're gonna get annihilated. It doesn't matter what you do. You're just gonna get crushed. Like, you're gonna lose, right? If you're trying to improve, it might be fun to have a bit of a go at them, but like, you're gonna lose hard. But if there's also next to it a table which has got a couple of whales, a couple of like maybe 1 or 2 taggy, like weakish regulars, or however you want to say it, and then like a couple of belugas or nits, whatever, the game's better to play in. If you've got a game with 5 nits in it, also, it's not a great game, because you may be able to beat the game, fine, but it's just they're all sitting there, like, the rate contributions, like, it's just hard to make any money out of that game, yeah? So, whereas you've got 5 like weaker players, I hate saying weak, but weaker players who've just got like more whaley stats. Someone's playing 45 VP, the other guy's got like 100, whatever. That's a good game to be in. That's going to be a splashy game. You can play tighter than them. You can play better than them. You can make money out of them, and the game's easier. Therefore, your win rate increases. I think a lot of people kind of just think, okay, I'm going to play in Zoom, jump in. Zoom is harder, but it's also far tighter. You've got any stake, NL2 or NL200, because there's not really any proper high stakes Zoom anymore, unfortunately. But like, just generally, if you look at it, the lowest level pools and the highest level pools all have nits in them. They've all got whales in them. They've all got very good players. Maybe not like really good players at the lowest levels, but they've got better players, okay? For the sake of argument. Better regs, weaker regs, however you want to look at it. The games are going to have that mix, but just generally, Zoom games are just going to be tighter. They're going to be harder, just overall. Nits are not going to put a lot of money in without really good hands. They're just going to play really, really nutted ranges. They're going to get ironed out by rake and just like kind of break even small win rate when they get their rake back. Whatever, misery. You're going to get people who are doing they're going to be playing a little bit better. Just in general, any stake regs are going to play a little bit better on Zoom. Subjective, but kind of objective, in my opinion. But they're going to be better than they will on regular tables most of the time. And the people who are better, there's not as many of them. And you're going to be playing against the weaker parts of the population more often, because you can just play against them. You can also play in position to them sometimes as well. If you can get in position to 3 whales in the table, that's going to make you a lot more than it is just being in a Zoom pool, just getting thrown in a fishbowl and chucked around with a bunch of nits. Couple of better players and very, very rare amount of whales. But there's going to be loads of fish. There's fish everywhere, but there's different types of fish, recreational, whatever. You can't say fish. You got to say, I don't give a fuck. Weaker player, fish, noob, whatever you want, spanner, like, you pick a word. It's all the same jargon. But generally speaking, if you're trying to attain a higher win rate and just make money monetarily, just game selecting is best. If you go and play a 1-2 in a casino, that's going to make you a lot more money than breaking even or tiny win rate at like NL10 Zoom, for example, right? But just generally. In terms of improving your game, though, Zoom can be much better because you can get the volume of hands in. So, like, really the way I would say this is, if you're trying to improve your game, like, doing simulations and stuff is great, but like, Future Wizard's is good in the fact that you can kind of use the trainer and simulate against a nut opponent. But also, just in terms of just not bringing it down to a real life level, just looking at the pros and cons of the game, the Zoom pools are going to challenge you a little bit more, because they're going to allow you to play faster, more hands per hour, so more volume, which is good, more volume, more spots. But it's also going to like enable you to play just generally versus, I hate the word better, but just a better standard of play overall, be it whatever type of play you might find. There's so many nits, but just generally it's good for that. But in terms of a win rate, your win rate is going to be much lower because of that, but you can supplement that with volume, but it depends what you want. Like, for example, use GG Poker as an example. The rake is so high that it crushes absolutely crushed. You get raked pre-flop, you get raked ridiculous amounts, whatever. You do get loads of rake back in the form of like the daily flip outs. You get the you can get flat rake back, or you could do the fish buffet thing. There's the spinning dial, but it's again, like really to make it worth it, you kind of want to hit the higher levels of that to get like the sort of 30-40+% rate back, whatever. And then put a lot of volume in. But even so, if you're losing in the games, it's hard to even make that worth it in the first place. It's hard, right? It's difficult. PokerStars, I think, is slightly better in the fact that it's slightly lower rake than GG, but and it's less like kind of RNG. But it's just, it's like really like you kind of outweigh. This is where we go into rate back versus win rate and leaderboards in terms of like, how do I make money? Where is the money coming from? The priority. This is where I think where people lose face a bit. The priority is beating the game. Fuck rakeback and all this win rate jargon. It's about how good you are. It's about how you can exploit the population. It's about how you can play strategically against the population in general. If you're a stronger fundamental player, but you can't exploit people, then all these nits and noobs and fish and however you want to say it, you're not going to beat them as hard as someone who's worse than you strategically, because the person who's worse than you is better at exploiting them, which means they win. So I'll just say this, right? This is going to sound really entitled. I genuinely think that I'm probably one of the top players in most pools. That's going to sound like the most entitled thing ever. I'm going to be honest. Strategically, I genuinely think I am. I put a fuck ton of work in. I'm coming for you higher stakes. Like, I'm coming. You see it. Give me another couple of months. Give me a year. You wait. I'm coming. But I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying. I have a problem where I really kind of forget to just tone it down. And you see a lot of other players and other streamers, and good for you. Like, they don't play very strategic. However, they know how to beat on people who are just playing a certain way, and good for them. Like, good for them. But it's kind of a merge between the two. If you're playing like NL10, for example, NL5, NL2, you need a different mindset and skill set than you do if you're playing like NL100, NL200, because the regs play different 200 than they do 2. The amount of bluffs and value ratio, everything changes. You must change. Right? If you're in a pool which has got like 90% nits in it, you need to be widening your ranges, you need to be attacking these people, but you also need to be giving them fucking respect when that money's going in. You need to be overfolding. Yeah? You need to be in situations where you've got people who are just like wildly over bluffing in stupid spots and just always bluffing when they go big. For example, you can just exploit those people. You don't have to like overfolding correct ranges and stuff when they're over bluffing wildly. It's silly, and it needs to kind of be stopped immediately. Okay, in terms of like the leaderboard return and stuff like this, like you could argue, ooh, if I put like stupid amounts of volume in, I can get leaderboard returns. There are people that do this, and again, good for them, right? We're not looking to shit on people, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, in terms of this like leaderboard thing, like I'll use GG, I suppose, because I'm mainly playing on GG at the moment, but like, if you put like tremendous amounts of volume, yay, GG Wizard hoodie, by the way. If you put tremendous amounts of time in to get the leaderboards, you're kind of putting so much time in that it's just like that time could have been better spent towards just improving and just building your role to get to the next level. Playing specifically for a leaderboard return, in my opinion, seems silly because, I mean, you can just beat the game. I'd rather focus on beating the game at a higher level and faster and focusing on that and improving all the time than just trying to like steadily only return rake back and leaderboard. That, I mean, if I was playing NL200 Zoom, you could even argue that you'd just be looking to like, if you could beat NL200 Zoom, you can play it, great. But you can also just look for like NL500, NL1K plus regular games where there's loads of like weaker players there and you can make more money anyway. So it's kind of like, it's a double-edged sword in a way. Honestly, I would still be focused on this like pillar, like think of like old school Mortal Kombat, like choose your destiny kind of thing, right? Where it's like you focus on just improving and getting to the next stage ASAP. That's all your priority is. Improve, get the fuck out, go to the next one. And the people who are trying to say, oh, well, I don't want to work hard, I don't want to improve, I just want to play this, and I'll supplement that for just loads of volume and rake back. Time investment, you can go to McDonald's, work for a minimum wage job. No, not to shit on people who work at McDonald's. I'm just saying, if you worked 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week in equivalent to people who grind like NL10, NL25, NL50, whatever, you probably make the same, if not more, and it's so much less stressful. Like, if you're focusing on improving, then improve and move on to the next stake. Just ASAP. Get knocked down, work hard, and then push to go back up again. That's all it is. Don't use your money. You know, you should be using your money to improve to the next level. Because there's no, like, I'm just saying it, there's no point in playing NL2 to NL100 and stuff. to be a little bit of extra money every month. Good for you, fair enough. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But really, in terms of time investment for the actual monetary money made, you need to be using that money to move on to the next stake. If you can be like NL 100 plus and stuff, maybe that's a bit different because you can start earning like sort of mega money in comparison. But I'm just saying, in general, it's kind of like you should be just focusing on improving and getting to the next stages as quickly as possible. So moving into the second part, which is all about strategy. There's still so much to go through. Oh my God. I didn't want this to be this long, but it's going to be, unfortunately. Strategic game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a lot of these points quickly. Some of these will have examples. Oh my God, this is probably going to be like a 3-hour video. I'm not even fucking editing this. God help me. God help anyone else who's watching. Focusing on strategic game then. So, what we want to be focusing on then is the other side of the coin. So we looked at mental game. Yeah. Now we're looking at the strategy side because strategy is quite important considering this is a strategy game. We should be considering this game like chess. I don't even play chess, but just chess, whether you argue it's been solved or whatever. Chess is a game of you see information, but it's about how many moves ahead you are of your opponent. Whatever. I don't play chess. I'm not going to pretend I play chess, right? But it's an extremely complex strategy game where you've got a plan and you're preemptively thinking of situations and you're countering how your villain is playing. Whatever. Poker is extremely strategic, but it's also psychological. There's also the mental side, but it's also a game of it's not complete information. So you're technically playing a very strategic version of the old school game Guess Who. That's technically what you're playing. Your betting patterns, your calling patterns, your villain's betting, calling patterns, raises, whatever, their folds, everything included is just you're knocking down little faces to try and get to the character to see who's who. That is literally a really good way of looking at poker. You're trying to figure out what your opponent has and you're trying to make money from it or you're trying to get away from it. This is basically what you're doing over and over and over and over again. 52 cards get dealt out, boom, 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 boom. Amount of players play their hands, strong hands, bad hands, board comes out, people get lucky percentages. You're never going to technically identify what your opponent's got until you see it. But all you can do is start to develop something which is called a range of hands. So you're starting to, I'm literally dumbing this down to the absolute level. You need to identify where money is coming from. You need to identify what range of hands people are playing pre-flop. You can see their BPIP, PFR. You identify what rough kind of percentage of hands they are playing, what kind of rough percentage of hands they're re-raising and 3-betting, 4-betting, whatever. This information is important and very relevant. So I'm going to just say it for the sake of argument. If I was playing 5% of hands, I'm raising 5% of hands, I'm 3-betting 1% of hands. There you go, like astronomically nitty. Okay, you've got like a couple, like maybe it says a couple of thousand hands in a person, whatever. You identify these stats. You can say, I know almost, technically speaking, I know essentially the exact amount of hands that you play. I know what 5% of hands looks like. I know roughly what kind of the amount of hands that is. Your 3-bet percentage of 1 over a couple of thousand hands. You're basically playing the nut end of all the hands. When you're raising, you've definitely got it to the this is the extreme version. I'm just saying, because that person is playing that way, you can almost essentially identify who their character is, their Guess Who character, immediately. If someone's playing 50% of hands, this is where it goes on to the opposite side. It's harder to identify the exact holding they have, but this is where it comes into play, where you're like, well, you're playing so many hands that it's very difficult to like have some really good hands and like in lines that people take. So if they like bet shove and they're playing 70% of hands, 50% of hands, 40% of hands, there's so many garbage combos of hands in that range. This is why you have to be like, this is something we'll talk about later, but I'm just saying in general, this is where you start to identify what kind of range of hands people are playing. So anyway, we're going to go into this specifically, so let's get to it. But I'm just saying that's kind of how we look at the game. Strategic focus is we want to focus on. This is a flaw, by the way. That's why it says not constantly. People I tend to find are not constantly looking to improve. They're focused too much on what their win rate is. They're focused too much on other people. They're focused on how other people play. They're not looking at their own game. They're not recording their sessions. They're not looking through hand histories. If they are looking through hand histories, they don't know what to look for. Because let's be honest, you could look through a hand history, but if you don't know what the actual answer is, or you don't know strategically what the rough answer is, you don't know how to exploit the player, you don't know how to do it through a solver, whatever, it's hard to know. Like you're only going on subjective opinion. So it's actually just saying, oh, you need to improve your game. That's actually quite difficult if you don't really know what to do or where to go. Again, using myself as an example, is it can take like I played a hand, I lost or I won, whatever. How could I have played that better? Right? I've worked with a few people, and that's a question I've asked. And that person may just say, I don't know. And that's fair enough, because you don't know the answer until you physically go find it. Whether it needs to be a coach, it needs to be a solver, it needs to be common sense, it just, whatever it is, it's hard to technically nail that. But in terms of like self-improvement, I would just say to you very, very quickly, is there are tools out there that are free. So for example, like the most simplest, I'm not saying solvers, but like GTO Wizard is a really good example, because you can just look at ranges immediately. You can look through hands, like for example, this is really quick. I'm not going to sort of faff around with this too much. Just change this. There we go. But just in general, like this is Wizard, for example. Skip all this, get out of my way. But you can just see, like you've got the practice here. You go to the trainer. You can set in certain spots. So that's just bear with me for 5 seconds, right? But like if you go to study here, drag this a bit. You can just, for example, just say you raise under the gun, the big blind calls. This is the board. Who fucking cares? This is the action you took. We've got to the turn. This is the turn strategy. Blah 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 blah. What you can start to do here is you can start. This is subjective in a way, because it's like kind of pure GTO format, rather than if you're playing micro stakes, it's kind of like not as relevant. But what I'm saying is this is a tool immediately where you can start to kind of look at, right, so I defended the big blind against under the gun. I can go to my big blind range, which is versus the undergun open. And in green, I can see all these types of hands that I should be defending. I should look at these hands that I may be re-raising. I can look at the type of hands I may be folding. Look at the types of hands, identify them. Immediately, you can already see on a basic level how to adapt against that open. This is free, by the way. GTOWizard.com, go for it. This is the board. We check, big blind bets. They bet a third, for example. Here we are. Again, you can say, right, oh, for example, I check called this, or I check raised the hand. You can say to yourself, well, actually, these are types of hands that may want to do certain actions. It's starting to give you don't learn frequencies, but what you do is you learn the basic concepts. You know, what types of hand do certain jobs, what they're trying to accomplish with their bet sizings, what kind of bet sizings are available, what kind of range is good for you versus them, etc., etc., etc. Okay? This is still the free part, really. Well, the pre-flop's free, and you get to do 1 or 2 post-flop situations as well daily. But this is free right there. Go get it right now. Like, there you go. That's an answer immediately. Okay, this isn't some sales pitch, by the way. There's a link to this. I'm just saying, right? This is another thing that's available to you. So if we go back to the document, then, in terms of like not constantly improving, where can I improve? That's available to you. I'm not saying go get coaching from someone, because coaching is also subjective. But just in general, like common sense, look at what your villain is, look at how they're playing, look at how the population is playing, look at the general basic of like what solvers can start to do, and then it's starting to give you an idea of where you're going. That's a very, very vague and basic introduction to how you can start improving. But in general, in terms of these points then for strategic game, real poker is the ability to adapt and use whatever theory or exploit is needed to beat the population. Okay? That's easy to say, so let's start breaking it down. So what is real poker? You don't look at the guys, stare them down, guns under the table, wild, wild west, what have you got, blah, 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 blah. But what it is like, in terms of winning at poker, like actually properly, and not just, these are 10 points on how to become a poker player in 2024. Go fuck yourself, mate. I'm not interested in that. I want to actually know how to play the game. Thank you very much. So entitled, but it's true. Ability to adapt and use whatever theory or exploit is needed to beat the population. So we kind of need to, this is again where we came to the first point before we started. If you're an NL2 player, NL5 player, right, the lowest levels, again, nothing to shit on low-level players, you need to identify, right off the bat, where your money is coming from. You need to identify that people who are playing NL2 and NL5 are probably, again, this not sound nasty, they're probably not very good
And I don't mean that they can't get value from their hands, but I'm just saying they're probably too tight or way too aggressive. They're probably whaley. They're probably having fun. They're probably being a bit silly in a lot of spots. That's fine. Like, let them do what they do. Let them enjoy themselves. Let them make the mistakes and focus on yourself. But what you need to do is you kind of need to take a step back from theory and prioritize this exploitation. Just look at people. Look at the players a bit more. The better the players, the higher the stakes, the more you need to focus a bit. Like, if you're playing better regulars at like mid stakes, high stakes, you need to start being a bit more, you kind of need to respect people and need to play a bit more theoretically sound. But there's still going to be recreational players, okay? But in general, like micro stakes, low stakes, the largest portion of win rates basically come from, I hate that word win rate, but the main winnings basically come from just identifying you're against a nit, do not pay this nit. You may probably need to overfold. You're identifying this person's whale, you need to call wider, you need to value bet far wider, you need to bet bigger, get more money for your hands, fold less. Excellent. Against the regulars, you can kind of like, it's kind of hit and miss, but you need to be a bit careful. Certain regulars have different tendencies at these low levels. They tend to generally be way too tight. Again, you just fold a lot, but people also just over bluff certain situations that are quite obvious. They check back the flop and that ace comes on the turn, then they bet the turn. A lot of these ace X, for better or for worse, they're going to have a lot of ace X in that range. A lot of turn things a lot of spots where they bet the flop and then ace comes on the turn, that's a really easy, scary card to bluff. A lot of these people don't bet their ace X on the flop, for better or for worse. So when they do, then continuation bet the turn. A lot of ace X is not in that region. But anyway, I'm just saying, I'm giving a couple of quick examples. But what I mean is, which is more important than just specific spots, is you just need to literally see who is in front of you. What profile is this player? Are they really tight? Are they really aggressive? Do I have no information whatsoever? Do I only know that they're playing 40% of hands over like a 2K sample, whatever? Whatever information is available to you, take it and use it immediately. It's relevant in any stake, but more so at like micro and low stakes. But just, you need to understand what you need to do to beat the game. If you're in, let's say you're in Rush Poker NL2, there you go, that's what you're in. That's the game you're in. You're not going to crush it by making Megalodon bluffs, unfortunately. What you will do is you'll crush it by just not paying a vast proportion of the population that is already beating the stake to some extent, because you're not just saying, oh, I've got a really good hand, I have to call, top of my range, can't fold this. Do you see what I'm saying? But what you're doing is you're just getting away from these spots where a lot of like losing regulars are not. And then when you've got situations where you're value betting, you're just value betting a little bit wider and a little bit better and better sizes than your opponents are. And you're making more money in situations. You're getting away from a lot of situations. You're not stacking off in these spots where you kind of have to call and things like this. And you're just winning. It's easy to just technically win. You just don't really do it in. Another thing as well is just attacking. I haven't put this as a point, but it's something which is good for exploitation. It's just attacking capped ranges. This has been said in probably any video over the last 15 fucking years, but it's true. Like, generally people at low micro stakes at any stake, to be fair, it's hard to do so, is they don't protect these checks. So their checks on the flops are very capped. They don't really, they're very frontal. They bet with aggression when they're barreling as bluffs. They bet with aggression when they're barreling with value. But when they have something with showdown, or they have like they're very capped and they don't really like protect these checks and things like this. So in terms of like when people attack flops, like they raise or re-raise pre and then they bet the flop and then they check the turn, you've got something which may be considered showdown value. Fine, okay, whatever. But if you've got a hand that's like, you kind of need to look past theory and just say, look, this person's probably just folding to a turn probe. They're called float bets technically when villains check and then whatever. But what I'm saying is you can kind of jump on their weakness, essentially. That's an exploit. Oh, it's also strategic, but it's more of an exploit where you're just saying, look, this guy's check is wildly unprotected. I can kind of just attack it with more hands than I'm supposed to, because it's going to work more than it's supposed to. Therefore, the EV of the play is very good. Yeah, things like this, okay? But when you're against like these kind of mid-stakes populations, against like 50 NL, moving into like 100 NL, things like this, you need to be a bit more careful where like it's more about how much your villains are over bluffing and what villains are going to like actually protect their ranges a bit. This is hard to just go through very quickly, but what I'm saying isn't very badly, I admit, is you just need to profile your players and you need to understand what you think they are doing. You're playing NL50, you're playing NL10, you're playing NL5. You need to identify how good or bad the general population is. You need to look at the tendencies of the pool. You're at NL50, people are still wildly under bluffing all in on rivers. People are wildly under check raising. People are not really turning hands into bluffs. People's checks are kind of just what they say on the tin. Their raises most of the time on rivers, and their bets on rivers are generally stronger than they're supposed to be. There will be definitely people in the pool who wildly over bluff silly ways, but just as a thing, you kind of just need to start looking at specifically who you're against. Very easy to say and not easy to put in practice, but it's something you will need to do. Essentially, if you identify these mistakes from villains or these leverages where they're checking and they're weak a lot, you need to kind of make notes on the opponents and then use that for future hands. Solvers provide the strategic foundation and framework. This is extremely true, and this is very important. One thing I'll say is the next few points combine, okay? But just in general, okay? Strategic game and focus. You need to be working with solvers, but I'm not saying you need to you don't get Pyre Solver or you don't get Wizard AI and spend hundreds of hours to try and beat NL2. That's bullshit, man. What you need to focus on micro stakes and low stakes, really, even to some extent mid stakes, is you just need to identify what people are doing. When the net is block betting or the nit is betting pot, there's two differences. When you get check raised small by a nit on a dry turn and things like this after they check call the flop, it doesn't matter how high in your range you are, because if you're just beat, then you're beat. Okay, that's more important than anything. But solvers are going to give you the framework and the foundation. The board is monotone. We generally bet small. For example, that's subjective. There are some deviations, but generally bet smaller. There are certain situations you 3-bet you 3-bet in any position. The board comes like ace, queen, 5. You generally want to bet really fucking small. You've got a really strong nut advantage. Yeah, you can do a lot of overbetting when you in situations where you've got a nut advantage. But this one, for example, you generally bet really small because all you're doing is just leveraging the fact that you can bet a lot of your range extremely often for a very small size, and it's very difficult for your villain to kind of deal with that because they're attacking then a range of hands. If they re-raise it, for example, that's just strong and nutted and protected. It's very difficult to deal with. Whereas if you go massive all the time, it kind of lets them just fold a lot of bad hands and just continue with their best hands, and it kind of bins a lot of your hands for what you want to do with it, for example. But anyway, that's a 3-bet pot example on the flop. But this foundation is so important. Looking at what kind of general c-bet sizes, what kind of rate, you need to start thinking about range construction, how the ranges of your opponents look. At NL2, you're not really focused on any of this. But it's really good to at least know roughly what you're doing. I know I can c-bet this board a lot. I know I should probably be checking a lot. I know I should probably be check raising this. I know I can do this. These are questions, these are answers that then start to improve your win rate over time. But to beat the stakes, essentially, it's just common sense. You don't need solvers to do this. You just need to not be doing it in, quite honestly. This is where it moves into exploitation. Exploitation then provides the ability to find additional profit where possible. So, for example, I'm just saying, look, okay, I've done a lot of work, a lot of theory. I know I can bet X, Y, and Z. I know I can bet small on this texture. However, I've got a really good hand. I flop to flush. For the sake of argument, I flop to small flush or medium flush. And I'm against someone who's playing 60% of hands. I could bet small. I could do some checking, whatever. But really, I kind of just want to bet quite big and attack. Like, say, for example, you've got 7-8 of spades, and the board's it doesn't even matter, but it's just 3 monotone cards that make a flush. They could have 60% of hands that could contain the ace, the king, the queen, the jack of spades, 10 spades, whatever. They're inelastic to whatever you bet. So you just kind of want to hope that they've got something decent and bet quite big. Checking and letting them check back. I'm not talking about theory, but I'm just saying you got a good hand. You're against someone like a passive, massive calling station who's playing way too many hands. You just want to bet really big. You don't want to do theory because it's going to cost you money. You just want to bet big. You want to hope they got something, and you want to keep blasting, put loads of money in, and try and stack whatever you can or get money from whatever you can. That's the best way to do it. Generally, if you know the GTO framework, then you know roughly how to play well. Just solid, strong, consistent, very, very good. And then on top of that, you say, right, I'm against a nit, so I'm going to play a certain way, but I'm also going to wildly deviate. Okay, so for example, the nit opens under the gun. You've got ace king in the small blind. Personally, if that nit is opening 12% of hands, maybe less, and they're raising they say they're 12, 10, 2. I think ace king offsuit, for example, is better just to call full frequency in the small blind than having anything else, because you just want to keep in a lot of hands. Okay, so that's where exploitatively, instead of just saying, oh, I 3-bet this a lot of the time, I call some of the time, that's not necessary or relevant when the opponent's strategy is wildly deviating to what equilibrium truly is. What I mean by that, because what that just said, if like let's say you look at like GTO Wizard or you go through Pio and you run a solution and you give them like a kind of correct range, they're playing and they're betting a lot of sizes that are correct, whatever. The solver is expecting them to play a certain way, get to the river with a certain rate of hands, etc., etc. If your opponent is playing half the amount of hands in that 3-bet range pre-flop than the solver is thinking it has, then your strategy needs to deviate as well. Yeah? If people are not getting to the river with the hands that you think they're getting there with, then your strategy must deviate wildly. It must change. Yeah? You see? If you're inputting something into a solver, it's like it's on premeditated assumptions. If your opponent, like this is where the AI is interesting with Wizard. Just quickly, is if you can node lock their range, then it can, it will massively change these solutions for you. It's really good because you can identify how they're playing, but you don't need that to beat micro stakes. You don't need it. You don't need any of it. You just need to know how people are playing. Honestly, you identify what range of hands they have. I know that their opening range is extremely tight. I know that they're folding loads of worse hands and not really continuing with much worse than mine. If I have ace king, for example, maybe I call and then I free bet them with a very polar range, like aces and kings, maybe queens, depending, maybe some like ace 5 suited some of the time because they overfold. They're like ace queens suited, maybe ace jack suited. They don't 4-bet, whatever. You've got a reason for doing it. But generally against these nits, you want to be super polarized. You want to be like free betting or 4-betting to get the money in, or you want to just be pure bluffing. And you want to just literally be playing in a very polarized fashion, essentially. But what I'm trying to get at is the framework from GTO is what you need in order to, if you want to look at improving your game, which is very important. Remember when we say not consistently improving, you need to have the framework in mind to just play well, and then the exploitative mindset to be able to identify situations where you can deviate wildly from like your basic sort of strategy, and then therefore print even further by avoiding situations that are like kind of artificial callers, or just making more money in situations that you wouldn't be normally, honestly. Okay. And then what also combines with this is then maintaining, on top of this, the mental control, maintaining mental control and discipline to stay consistent. This is why we looked at mental game, because if you haven't got mental game, none of your theory, we haven't even looked at any of the theory spots, by the way. We're literally just talking about general sort of thoughts, really. And things that you need in order to have the mindset to improve, just generally. But like, you need to identify what the strategic plays are, theoretically. You need to identify how to exploit the population. And then on top of that, you need to then have mental control and capacity to stay consistent. You can't go into games miserable and frustrated with how poorly your results were. I'm not saying how bad or good you played, but your results were. If I lost 5 buy-ins the previous session, you lost 5 buy-ins the previous session. What the fuck does that matter? You're in the next session. It's all one session. It's all one session. There's no I'm up X amount or down X amount, so I'm going to stop. If you're playing well and you've got time to play, then you keep playing. If you're mentally burnt out and a bit frustrated, then stop. But essentially, you're going to have to work through it in order to stay consistent anyway, right? Because it's all one session, guys. It doesn't end. It doesn't start. It just plays through. People say, oh, I'm up X amount of money. Now I should probably finish. What does that mean? What does that mean? If you're in an amazing game, you're making money by being there. It doesn't matter if you're up or down. Oh, but I could lose all my profit. Fucking cares. You're in a situation to make money. That's all that matters, right? I feel like people lose that concept. But yeah, we need to combine these, okay? And then real win rates come from small pots. So this is again something, I mean, we're talking about just concepts, but like this is not covered. People are not identifying. I promise you, when you're looking through your hand histories, whether you're doing coaching, whether you're doing academies, anything, people are just looking at these big pots often and saying, oh, I'm winning this and X. You need to be focusing. I mean, big pots are super important also. But the things that happen very often, and more so, are the small pots. You need to be identifying, are you winning these little extra 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 big blind pots again and again and again and again and again? Or are you losing them? You're not probing, you're not attacking weakness, you're not consistently raising, you're not turning hands into bluffs, you're not value betting correctly, you're too scared or you're too aggressive, you're overplaying hands, you're underplaying hands, you're not bluffing enough, you're folding too much, you're not 3-betting enough, whatever it is. All of these combine into this just massive just sponge of just mistake. All these issues and leaks and problems. This is what is good, I suppose, with the graphs, is you can look for these trends. But just generally, is like you need to identify that the small pots are super important. Don't just look for, I mean, Christ, I got in kings and he had aces. Whoopie fucking do. I had a set, the other guy had a set, or the guy river did. Who cares? It makes no difference. That's not important. What I want to know is if you check shoved a really terrible hand to check shove with for value or as a bluff, and they called and you lost, and it's really bad, that's what I want to know about. That's what I want to work on. But I don't care about aces v kings. Yeah, like the small pots are super important. So when you're looking at your hand histories and going through things, really focus on these small pots, because I promise you, there's so many situations where you're not winning money where you should be. That is, something we will cover a little bit later. But look at these small pots, guys. Like, definitely look at them. Not exploiting population. So we've covered this vaguely, but let's just reiterate it. I think I said that wrong, but there we go. Your population are your villains. Whether you're in a regular game, whether you're in a Zoom pool, whatever it be, you need to know how they play. The lower you play, and again, it doesn't matter. It's not, I'm playing higher than you, I'm better than you, I'm playing lower, I'm not worthy. I'm winning, let me post. I'm not winning, let me be envious and whatever. It doesn't matter. Look at the games you're playing, and the lower stakes you play, the generally weaker your populations will play. The more face-up they'll play, the tighter they'll play, the weaker they'll play, whatever. You're not going into NL 10 and expecting people to be 5-bet bluffing very often. I'm not saying they can't, but you kind of see where I'm going with this. You can't be going like, oh, well, maybe he's turning this into a bluff. He might be check raising bottom pair, maybe overbetting, shoving. I know my solver says I should be calling this combo. Stop using the fucking, this is something a little bit later, but stop using the fucking solver as an excuse to make some kind of play or defend or bluff or whatever, because that's what you're supposed to do. Because again, as we said, this is so important. I can't remember who said this. I think it was I don't remember the guy's name. Carrot Corner, Pete Clark. I think the guy's name was. The guy was talking something other about not using the solver as a kind of a crutch. I think that's the word he used, where you're kind of leaning on it and saying, "Oh, I know I can do this and get away with it." The solver said it was okay, so it's okay. I love that because that's so true. It's something it's a big problem for me. It's always been a problem for me. I'm getting better at it, but it's still always going to be a problem, probably one way or another, with my complete egotistical nature. It's just saying, the lower that you play, the weaker the competition. You just need to simplify it down and not be looking like I'm just going to say something. A lot of these massive bluff catchers are actually kind of neutral EV, equilibrium anyway. So you're not even making massive amounts of money from these big bluff catches. It's only a case of you're not getting then run over because people are bluffing and you're not catching and whatever. But against these low stakes games, you're just not. People will definitely be bluffing, but you just call with really good hands and don't call with the marginal ones against people who don't bluff very often. You're kind of already winning naturally. Doesn't matter how good or bad you are. That's because a lot of people just go, I've got top pair, I've got two pair, I've got a set, I have to call. And then they just lose, and then they go, oh, I knew I was losing, but I had to call, that's fine. They check the solver, go, yeah, I got the tick, yeah, I knew I had to call, they're fine. But actually, that's a leak, because if those people are not bluffing, then that call becomes terrible, and if you node-locked the range of villain and the frequencies that they use, realistically, your call then becomes terrible. Okay, so there we go. Okay. So, exploiting population. One thing I would say is we're almost on the strategy side, by the way. We're looking at actual hand histories and we're looking at actual points. That would be really fun. That would be cool. Okay. But just generally, just something to say. You're not playing enough hands. I know you're not. Don't look at solvers and don't look at just general strategy and be like, right, my chart tells me I need to open X amount of hands. If you're in a game which is full of nits and full of weak passive opponents, widen the ranges that you open. Widen the ranges that you 3-bet. Widen the c-betting. If they're checking and folding a lot, then bet c-bet more. If they're attacking your checks, then c-bet and folding to your bets, then c-bet more. Do what your hand wants to do more than your range. If you're against weak opponents, you don't need to play in a certain style. This is something I'm going to sound like a hypocrite, because on my stream I play quite strategic. It's mainly just because I like doing it and it's getting me through the games, but at the same time it's costing me a win rate essentially. Is because I'm just trying to play really fundamentally strategically well with some exploitation. But there's a lot of things that could be changed in a vacuum that would potentially give me a better vacuum win rate at that stake, even though for the sake of what I'm trying to do, I sacrifice that to some extent because I like showing people what I can do, and I like trying to apply what kind of theory I've learned. But at the same time, that doesn't mean, that's kind of a contradiction to some of these points that we're going through. But just generally look at the people you're playing, again, as we spoke about previously, and exploit them. If people are super over aggro, they're three betting way out of whack, and you've seen people three betting queen 7 off and stuff, like button cut off, whatever, then you know that three bet's coming way more often. Then your marginal opens need to be kind of reduced, or you need to add in more potential 4-bet bluffs also, just to kind of counter the fact that they're just wildly gonna have to wildly overfold to your aggression, because they just have so many hands in that range that are shit, basically. So you need to kind of adapt to the pool immediately. Okay. Where are we? Here we go. But yeah, not playing enough hands. Don't just play like 15% of hands. Don't play 20% of hands. I need to do more of this myself, but like I'm playing roughly like 24, 25 VPIP. I could probably make that closer to like 30, probably, because I think, like, say my PFR also, like I need to be raising more hands, but I'm doing a lot of exploitative flats against a lot of tight opponents, so my PFR drops. But my VPIP, like you need to be playing more hands against weak players, like the recreational players, the nitty players. You need to be opening more hands against them. You need to be attacking boards more. You need to be 3-betting more. You need to be involved more. This is something that's actually quite important. Live is when you're very deep, but you've got kind of like marginal shitty kind of hands. Like, maybe like, I'm not talking garbage, but I'm talking like weaker marginal calls. Get involved with really, really whaley players more, because you're just going to get in situations where you make hands, you can make tons of money. When you're against weaker players, especially in position, you're just going to beat them very often, right? You don't have to call really, really wide because you're going to have to fold a lot. But you see where I'm going with this. You can just be in situations to make kind of additional money, which may be sort of somewhat questionable to what theory suggests. Something which I don't do as much, I suppose, and I'm not the best with this, but I think it is very important if we're looking at exploiting, is looking into timing tells and bet sizes. Now, this is subjective to each person, so this is something that, I mean, I'm not great with this, so I'm not going to pretend I am. But just as a thing, if you're looking at tight players as an example, right? If a tight player on the river bets, it's generally a red flag anyway. But if they're betting like half pot, compared to if they're like over betting, or if they're betting like 30% or something on the river versus like potting it or over betting, you can kind of see the trends, right? Like, for example, there may have been like like an ace-high board. They bet the flop, they snap check back the turn, and then they block the river, for example, and they're in it. They're not bluffing the river, but they've probably got like a weak ace, which they bet the flop and then they check turn. Or maybe they've got like ace 10 or something. They didn't want to double barrel it. They check back or whatever. Then they go back and bet the river, but they know they're winning probably, but they don't want or need to go massive with it, so they bet small. That's not a mistake on their part, but I'm just saying their tendency is going to be like, this is something we'll cover later also, but just generally it's going to be a value hand that's beating a bluff catcher. So you're going to go, oh, you check the turn, I've got like king, queen here, I know I need to call, I call, and then, oh, I lost, okay, no problem, that's fine, that's an easy call. But actually that's happening every single time, and a lot of these kind of weaker regular players and recreationals, especially tighter players, these bets and probes are just so, they're not like nutted and strong, but they're winning against your calling range basically, like, let's go with probably 90% of the time. Not all the time, but 80-90% of the time, which means that your calls are actually not great, and you need to either bluff them or fold, honestly, because it's not great to just say, I can just flick the 3 big blinds, flick the 4 big blinds on the river, easy call, excuse me, fine, you had something, okay, moving on. Because those are, seriously, like, there's something I've learned over this challenge, is like, those fucking add up, and they are so consistent. So you need to really keep an eye on those. Okay, that's actually quite important. Some people have timing tells as well. I'm kind of I suppose, like, this is bad habits from me, but like, I've done like probably close to like 1 million hands at NL2 over the last like year and a half or something, where I've just been drilling, like when I'm drilling situations, like, I'm not learning anything from this entitlement again, right? But not learning how to play against an NL2 player, but it's just learning playing a real person and how that person reacts to micro sizes, to overbets and things like this, because I'm just trying to learn the frequencies and learn like quite complex plays against humans, which I feel sometimes more valuable than against a solver. it's because that helps me learn and use them. But I was just going really, really fast with all my actions because I was focusing on actions per minute. But in general, people tend to like when they bluff, they do tend to bluff quite quickly. Some like if someone was going to go for a value bet, you would think again, this is subjective, but generally on the river when people value bet or they're like 4-betting pre and stuff and they got a good hand, they generally take a minute because they want to think about what they're against. They want to think about what size they should choose. Like pre-flop especially, they're 4-betting and stuff. They're not going to snap 4-bet you a lot of the time. With aces and stuff, they're going to think about it for a second. They don't want to come across. They take their time most of the time. So you can look at that. Okay, it's important. People have different sizing tells. People have different timing tells. So it's subjective, but look into it. It is quite relevant, in my opinion. Something we've already previously covered, but again, something to cover, something to talk about is HUD data. So again, we've already mentioned it, but if you've got the HUD data, exploit it, use it. It's very important. The first thing I look at, I'll use GG as an example, is I can just quickly click on, you can see their profile and their VPIP and PFR and 3-bet, whatever. 3-bet's a bit weird, but the VPIP PFR is fine. Is you can see roughly kind of how they're playing and you get a very basic feel with what they're doing and how they're doing it because you can see, right, that guy's playing 15% of hands, that guy's playing 10% of hands, that guy's playing 30% of hands, that guy's 3-betting, whatever. You can kind of get a very basic idea immediately without any work with who you're against, and that changes your kind of strategy. If you played hands against someone before and you just know that they're very tight, it's really good straight away to use that information when you're playing against them, and that gives you a bit of framework to identify maybe a bit of a battle plan before you start. So it is good, and it is relevant in my opinion. Something that never ever really gets covered, I almost never hear this, is there are no rules to this. So you're not playing, like, solvers are very relevant, but solvers are not the be-all end-all of everything, okay? They're not like the hyper end game. When you're, even people, I'm just going to say, I don't play nosebleeds, but if you look at people who play nosebleeds, yeah, they're going to be very, very strong players. They're going to be playing very, very strong theory, but they're going to deviate in a lot of situations because there's going to be meta game between each other. There's not, if you put a high stakes player against a high stakes player, they're not really beating each other unless there's like, even the edges are very small. Unless you're really the absolute end of the game, like Linus Love or someone, right? As an example. But I'm just saying, they're gonna be playing more hands than they're supposed to. They're gonna play in different ways. There's gonna be dynamics. They're gonna understand someone maybe not bluffing as much, or they're bluffing too much, or whatever. They're gonna have little kind of like meta games going on. I suppose that's something to say. But in terms of micro stakes, low stakes, mid stakes, even to some extent high stakes soon, there's a lot of people who just don't play as good as you think they play to some extent. So it's like people, if you, I always use nits as an example. I'm going to use like a better reg this time. There may be a better reg in the pool, but that you can see that generally they're like over. Like I'll use myself as an example here, right? I'm over bluffing with over bets in a lot of situations, rather than saying, or I'm check jamming and things like this. Instead of rolling the frequency, I just say, look, I know this against the villain's bet sizing. I know that I feel he's not as nutted here as often. So therefore I feel like shoving more than I'm supposed to as a bluff, for example, might be more appropriate. I feel like this guy doesn't really, like most of the population don't pay when you go all in. So I may have a really good hand, but I say, well, actually, I know if I shove here, I'm probably never getting called. But if I bet like 80% or whatever, then I do get called. So that's a deviation I can make. It's something that's going to make money. Like, you don't have to worry about it. No one's exploiting you properly. I know I'm saying exploit people, but a lot of people are exploitable. But if it's really hard. Like if you're especially Zoom, you're in a pool of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players, thousands of players potentially. It's very difficult to exploit someone unless they are wildly doing something. Like they're not playing enough hands. Like they're playing half the amount of hands they're supposed to, or they're 3-betting ridiculous amounts, or you've seen them like 4-bet like King 7 offsuit. You see things and you note things, but it's hard to really get massive data and really properly. People are not really exploiting you quite how you think they are, so I wouldn't worry about it, honestly. Just focus on things that you can exploit in their general play and use that in your game. But there are no rules. If you need to overbluff a spot, if you feel like attacking and using a size more than you're supposed to, do it. There's no rules. Solvers give us a framework, but they're not the be-all end-all of the game, like at all, especially at the lower stakes. Like I can't reiterate it more. I can't emphasize it more. Overfold to small river probes from tight players or attack. We spoke about that already, so I'm not going to cover that again. Don't be afraid to call versus aggressive players. These are very vague, but they're true. It's not a case of, oh, this guy's aggressive, I know he can bluff, so all of a sudden I just defend with my entire range 100% of the time. No. But what I'm going to get into, and we're going to go through some examples very soon, is we're going to look at just spots where it's just like, look, people, this is one leak that most low players, like low level players have, is that you're just generally folding too much. Generally, in all spots, you're not defending the big blinds enough. You're not flatting enough. You're not you're not defending hands. You're not flatting the cut off the button, the small blind enough. You're folding. You're not three betting enough. You're not aggressive enough. You're folding. You're not defending. You're not peeling the flop. You're not floating the flop. You're not attacking the turn. You're not doing anything enough to win pots, to win at the game. Like, that's not what you do. People are generally just looking for really good hands. They're just playing in this like 2003 way where they're just very taggy, kind of nitty, just kind of have good hands. Let the fish do whatever they do, and then the game doesn't work like that as much as it perhaps used to, especially online. So you need to kind of like be understanding. Look, a lot of players in general, just because a player's a regular doesn't mean they're even any good, but I'm just saying a lot of players know that they should be like double barreling a lot of spots. For example, they know they should be attacking. They can definitely, like, even at micro stakes or low stakes, you're still going to encounter people who can like overbet potentially, but it's just like people who are going to be aggressive on flops and turns. You're not going to be able to check call really weak hands and just check turn and then check back river. That's a 2-L thing. That's a live 1-2 thing. Honestly, it is. You shouldn't expect to win like that because it's not how it works. But what you need to be doing is defending appropriately. So we'll look at those examples in a minute. But those are all the points, just generally mental and strategic points that are very important. Okay. And then what we're going to do, I've decided, because this is an hour and a half, I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to do a second part where we cover situations. Where we look at these playing way too tight, playing way too aggressive, looking at different types of some of the complex situations that I apply, and then also looking at examples of hands. We're going to do those in a separate video. I don't want to do a 3-hour video. We'll do a separate one. So that's part 1, guys. And then for part 2, we'll go into everything else. So well done if you've watched to this point. Please like, please comment, please subscribe. I'll leave a note or a link in the description with my Twitch. I'm streaming a couple of times a week for the challenge. We're starting to enjoy a bit more that I'm adapting better to the pool, and also that we're going more into like kind of lowish mid stakes now, where we're not just playing like NL10 and shit over and over again, where people just literally just have the nuts every hand. It's a bit more interesting anyway. So see you in the next one. Goodbye.